During the last broadcast, I spoke about how the gaming industry, particularly in the West, has been experiencing a rather turbulent period. And while things aren't completely going amazing on the other side of the globe, there is a rising tide of AAA releases coming from the East. Just this year, we've seen South Korean studio Shift Up going public with an IPO worth $320 million. Shift Up's IPO is fresh off the heels of success of their AAA debut, Stellar Blade, which is estimated to have moved 1 million copies as of June. Before Stellar Blade, Shift Up was known for mobile games such as Destiny Child and Nikke Goddess of Victory. The latter has made over $70 million in its first month of release, reaching around $400 million by a year. You may or may not have seen an advertisement or two of Nikke on YouTube or on the street, whether you're in the United States, Japan, or South Korea. Those advertisements usually feature attractive female characters with, shapely proportions. And since a good chunk of the gameplay, if I'm correct, is a cover shooter, you'll spend plenty of time looking at the characters' backsides as they gun down their enemies. It seems the approach of using attractive characters to sell games was also used for Stellar Blade, which features the main character Eve in a skin-tight suit with the option to try on more revealing outfits as players unlock them in-game. Kim Hyung-tae, a game director, mentioned that special attention was paid to the character's back, as that's the part of the character the player faces most of the time. News sites, such as IGN France and the Mary Sue, have remarked that the game plays to the typical heterosexual male fantasy of hypersexualizing women. The former criticized Eve for being designed by someone who has never seen a woman before, while the latter mentions that the hypersexualization is a problem, because Eve is the only type of woman that men want to see. Whatever the case, the game launched to positive reviews with a user rating of 9.2 on Metacritic, the highest rating of its sort for a PS5 game. Sales were so successful, Shift Up has already launched a roadmap for additional content updates, with consideration for a PC port and a potential collaboration with other IPs. Of course, while Stellar Blade is the most prolific South Korean AAA production to have graced a living room, there have been other major releases from that country, including Round 8's Lies of P. Also a studio that normally makes mobile games, Lies of P was their entry into the AAA market, drawing inspiration from FromSoft's Bloodborne and Carlo Collodi's Adventures of Pinocchio. And some of us are old enough to remember the popular MMO Ragnarok Online. While not as prolific as EverQuest, Guild Wars, or World of Warcraft, one has remembered many in the Asian community obsessing over this game. Of course, while South Korea has had its share of major hits that have found recognition beyond its borders, there is another prominent country who's beginning to be noticed in many industries, including gaming. While there are major domestic hits like Honor of Kings gracing almost every Chinese gamer's mobile phone, other games have found audiences not just in Asia, but also in the West. In 2020, MiHoYo, known overseas as HoYoverse, launched Genshin Impact, a game that revolutionized the gacha genre, introducing AAA-level production value graphics, engaging gameplay mechanics, and a vast open world that continues to expand each year. While most gacha games were simply thinly veiled slot machines, Genshin Impact introduced a complex combat loop, rewards for exploration, and an endgame area in which one can test their characters and abilities. Despite the Japanese-style name and the anime-esque art style, it was also an opportunity to introduce Chinese culture to the world. Upon launch, the opening area of Mondstadt could have easily been mistaken for a discount shop version of Hyrule from Breath of the Wild. Grasslands as far as the eye can see, slimes instead of choo-choos, hilichurls instead of bokoblins. Yet, as the game opened up, the player gets introduced to a vast, varied vista filled with mountains and valleys known as Liyue, with peaks inspired by the Zhangjiajie mountain range in Hunan, and the capital city taking cues from ancient Chinese cities. The addition of Liyue and its characters was an opportunity for Chinese culture to reveal itself. Building on that strength, HoYoverse has also launched Honkai Star Rail, featuring characters such as Dan Heng, whose moves are inspired by Chinese martial arts, as well as settings and characters that fuse Chinese architecture and writings with its sci-fi aesthetic. Yet, as of recent, HoYoverse has also come under fire for its lack of cultural sensitivity, perceived or otherwise. Genshin Impact is known for drawing inspiration not just from Chinese culture, but from other cultures as well, giving the world of Teyvat a global feel. You have the German-inspired Mondstadt, the Japanesque Inazuma, the French-influenced Fontaine, and Sumeru, which drew inspiration from the Middle East. While there has certainly been backlash when Sumeru characters are introduced, with some of them having pale skin, it seems that controversy has once again reared its ugly head, with dissatisfied gamers complaining that characters from the upcoming Natlan region, this time inspired by South America, are too light-skinned. Not only is there a coordinated boycott campaign and a petition on change.org, but voice actors who have voiced characters in the game, including Ann Yatko, Jenny Yokobori, and Zeno Robinson, have posted on X in support of this campaign. I can only speak to my experience from working in the localization team myself, but Hoyoverse has listened to criticism before. The outrage over the lack of anniversary rewards in 2021 was so great that it was discussed internally amongst the team. While we were simply told to keep calm and carry on, it should be noted that the complaints aren't entirely ignored. In the end, as some would know, the anniversary rewards were adjusted and increased in response to the backlash. There have been comments across sites like X and Reddit that have mentioned that Chinese companies care for DEI initiatives far less than their Western counterparts. While the Chinese do not share America's dogmatic obsession with political correctness, it is still important to note that Hoyoverse nevertheless hopes to sell its product overseas. It's because of this that, at least during my time there, our style guide insisted on gender-neutral pronouns, as well as ensuring that our translations remained in line with mainstream socio-political sensibilities within the English-speaking world. In other words, Hoyoverse adheres to political correctness as long as it benefits the bottom line. The same could be said for just about any company, not just in China, but across the world. However, I am getting a little carried away and must digress. Articles from Foreign Policy and the Pew Research Center have accused China of having little or no soft power. While Japanese animation and game franchises are known the world over, with many children being able to name Super Mario and Dragon Ball Z as easily as they can name Mickey Mouse. And while South Korean pop music has captivated audiences all over the world with hits like Gangnam Style and Next Level, China unfortunately doesn't have anything of equivalent influence to boast of. Sinophiles may counter-argue by mentioning Chinese diplomatic overtures to the Global South, expanding its economic influence through the Global Belt and Road Initiative. Others might point to how the high-speed rail system in China has rapidly sprung to life, energizing an infrastructure that people in the West can only dream of. While all of that may be true, it still sidesteps the sad notion that if one was to ask any average gamer on what they think of China, it's most likely to be an opinion of a political nature rather than one of cultural fascination, the latter usually being reserved for older generations, or those with a deep academic interest in China. However, thanks to Genshin Impact, Honkai Star Rail, and now the recently launched Zenless Zone Zero, MiHoYo is one of the major players in trying to change that dynamic, but they are far from alone. While everyone was reeling from the first wave of COVID in 2020, a graphically beautiful trailer showcasing Sun Wukong, a main character of the 16th century folktale Journey to the West, was shown not just to audiences in China, but all over the world. Curiosity naturally followed. For those that don't know, Journey to the West tells the tale of a Tang dynasty monk, Xuanzang, traveling to India in search of enlightenment. He travels with 3 companions, one of which is Sun Wukong, a mischievous monkey with a staff. While there are some in the West who are vaguely familiar with the story, many more are aware of the Japanese manga series it inspired, Dragon Ball. Rather ironic that Japanese media has done more to export Chinese stories than China itself in this regard. The high production value of Black Myth Wukong's trailer, along with the developers stating in an interview that they intend their game to be a AAA title, complete with a one-time fee, as opposed to the typical free-to-play offerings that usually crowd the Chinese game market, the people were understandably hyped. But, as anyone who is familiar with publicity knows, not all publicity is good publicity. Some old messages and pictures have surfaced of Game Science, the Hangzhou-based company behind the game, which contains the maturity and professionalism of a middle schooler who has just discovered profanity. One was a picture of a job advertisement from around 2015, which featured cartoons of men in very lewd positions with messages like, "You must work overtime," and "Fat people are not welcome," as the headlines before listing the requirements for job openings. Moreover, as recent as 2020, there have been comments on Sina Weibo that have made headlines across Western social media. Feng Ji, the CEO and founder of Game Science, posted on Weibo that he hopes to increase his following, or recruit more people, but that he felt he's been licked until he can't get it up anymore. Further down the post, he stated that it would be his honor to provide a great pleasurable experience, of the kind that usually involves the lower body. While I do know Chinese, I can't pretend that I'm a scholar in the language. Many people believe that I have a lot of room for improvement. However, the post, crude as it was most certainly intended in good humor, the first post being a rather vulgar way of expressing that he's filled to the brim with support, and that he hopes the game will be a great experience for everyone, akin to, dare I say, an orgasm. It seems that sexual references are quite common for him, as later in a post he's gotten wet a few times from watching the trailer, and there's a lot of pressure coming from his pants. In other words, he can only get so erect. Another comment by a lead developer complained in a Weibo post about a perceived need to cater to a female audience, saying that the latter is quite simple-minded and easy to scam. The remarks of Feng Ji and the vulgar posters were not necessarily sexist. Vulgar? Absolutely. Immature? Definitely. And certainly not a good look from a public relations standpoint. The remark from the lead artist is of course concerning, given that women are a growing demographic among gamers, taking up 46% of the American gaming population. But that's it, isn't it? American gaming population. As the industry has matured and grown, there has been a growing call for gaming to be more welcoming to women, and for the hobby to take initiatives to be more diverse and inoffensive to those outside the target audience. In America! As Game Science is put front and center and is exposed to global scrutiny, countering Western perceptions of sexism is a challenge they will have to face, one way or another. Chinese society, which isn't exactly known for its permission of free expression, also isn't too concerned about DEI initiatives as much as their Western counterparts. This holds true of the other Chinese companies I've mentioned before. While the sexist remarks could be attributed to growing pains, only time will tell if Black Myth Wukong will buck the trend and win over fans in spite of the controversy. Of course, there is another country in East Asia that has been influential, but that is a story for another time. Until then, thank you for listening.